Hello everyone, welcome back to the Doctrine, Dogma, and Davide podcast. My name is Davide, and today I want to start a series of videos talking about the Second Vatican Council. And in this series of videos talking about the Second Vatican Council, I want to sort of discuss some of the controversy surrounding it, as well as its ramifications, its teachings, and its authority. But before getting into too many of those details, I think it's first important to understand exactly what the Second Vatican Council was and a little bit of the historical context surrounding the council. Now, the story of the Second Vatican Council really begins with the First Vatican Council that was called by Blessed Pius IX in 1869. And the reason that the Second Vatican Council really starts with the First Vatican Council is because the First Vatican Council was actually cut short when the Italian national troops stormed the city of Rome. After the Italian nationalists took the city of Rome, Blessed Pius IX declared that the council was suspended indefinitely. And so the Second Vatican Council was called as sort of a continuation of the First Vatican Council. However, John the 23rd, in convoking the council, did make it very clear that this was a new ecumenical council that was meant to supplement and follow up the work of the First Vatican Council. Now, the link between the First Vatican Council and the Second Vatican Council is really important because both councils were deeply concerned with how the Church has to respond to the modern world. Blessed Pius IX was deeply concerned with modernism, which St. Pope Pius X later called the synthesis of all heresies. And as a result, the First Vatican Council placed a very strong emphasis on the authority and jurisdiction of the Pope in preserving the faith, as well as insisting on the fact that the Church's teachings may not be dictated to by secularists, scientists, or philosophers, that the teachings of the Church were handed down to us by God, and that no one has the authority to alter or abolish them. And so the First Vatican Council was primarily focused with combating the evils of modernism and of modernist heresies that were attacking the Church at the time, and that I would also argue continue to batter and attack the Church. The Second Vatican Council also seeks to address how best to respond to the modern world, but while the First Vatican Council focused mainly on how to preserve the integrity of the faith, the Second Vatican Council was aimed more at how do we properly pitch or explain or exposit the faith to the modern world, as well as how to better accompany the modern world in a way that the modern world will understand, so that we can accept the things that are good and reject the things that are evil in order to more effectively meet the needs of the modern world in bringing everyone closer to Christ. And as a result, Vatican II has a reputation for taking a much more conciliatory approach and tone towards the modern world as well as to people of other faiths than previous councils. In fact, it has taken on such a drastic change in tone that there are many people who have openly accused the Second Vatican Council of heresy, but that's a charge that we're going to get into later. Now, when it comes to the Second Vatican Council, there are three popes that you should really know. You should know John the 23rd, who opened it, Paul VI, who closed it, and you should know Pius XII, who really was the pioneer of many of the theological concepts and ideas that were ultimately promulgated in the documents of the Second Vatican Council. In fact, Pius XII is the second most cited source in the Second Vatican Council, second only to the sacred scriptures. And so while Pius XII was not directly involved in the council because he had passed away by the time it was convened, his writings and his theology were deeply influential in the workings of the council. And so I believe that Pius XII remains a key figure in understanding the council and the council's teachings. In fact, the writings and actions of St. Pius XII were really instrumental in pushing forward the theological concepts of aggiornamento and ressourcement that became very important in the Second Vatican Council. The word aggiornamento means updating, and that refers to the idea that the Church should be updating that which can and must be updated in order to properly accompany the modern world, and ressourcement means return to the sources, which was sort of the more traditional counterbalance to the updating, which was a desire to return to the earliest sources of theology, to return to the Church Fathers, and to return to earlier practices in order to more faithfully preserve the traditional Catholic faith. And as it happens, that updating and that return to the sources is another point of significant controversy when it comes to the interpretation and the views on the Second Vatican Council. But in any event, the Second Vatican Council was ultimately convened by Pope John the 23rd on October 11th, 1962. The council proceeded for about 8 months until the death of Pope John XXIII, at which time St. Pope Paul VI was elected to the pontificate and continued the council until it closed on the 8th of December in 1965. Over the course of the council, Vatican II produced and promulgated 16 documents, 4 constitutions, 3 declarations, and 9 decrees. And ever since the closing of the council, it has been the subject of a great deal of controversy, from radical traditionalists who accuse the council of outright heresy, to radical progressives within the church who insist that the council either went further than it actually did, or at least ought to have. These progressives often appealing to what they call the spirit of Vatican II rather than the actual explicit text contained within the documents promulgated. But aside from the arguments and the debates over the specific theology promulgated by the Second Vatican Council, perhaps the most impactful fruit of the Second Vatican Council, felt by most average Catholics, is the promulgation of the Novus Ordo Missae. The Novus Ordo Missae, or in English, the Novus Ordo Mass, was a significant change of the liturgy of the Latin Rite. The most immediately obvious change was the fact that, aside from being said in Latin, the Novus Ordo, or the new Mass, was permitted to be said in the vernacular, which in the United States would be English. And so as a result, the old form of the Mass is often referred to as the traditional Latin Mass, or just simply the Latin Mass for short, despite the fact that the Novus Ordo Mass may also be said in Latin. However, in practice, the Novus Ordo is very rarely said in Latin, and most times doesn't even contain any Latin at all, despite the fact that Sacrosanctum Concilium, the document from the Second Vatican Council dealing with the reform of the liturgy, explicitly states that the Latin in the new Mass must be preserved. And so because the changes of the liturgy became sort of the most tangible manifestation of the impact of Vatican II, it became something of a flashpoint of controversy surrounding the Second Vatican Council and the changes that came about after the fact. There are sedevacantists who assert that Pope John XXIII and Paul VI are both anti-popes who committed the crime of heresy at Vatican II, and that therefore there has never been a valid pope since Pius XII. There are traditionalists who believe that because the Second Vatican Council did not make any extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements, that therefore it is not infallible and it need not necessarily be adhered to. There are more moderate traditionalists like myself who prefer the traditional Latin Mass, and indeed I do attend the traditional Latin Mass every week when I can, but who still accept and embrace the Second Vatican Council and accept the changes in the liturgy as valid and licit, even as we have concerns with some of the changes that were made in the Novus Ordo Missae. There are sort of more normal, everyday Catholics who see nothing wrong with the Novus Ordo or the Second Vatican Council, and I think oftentimes are just very confused and baffled by the amount of controversy surrounding the Council. And then, of course, you have more progressive Catholics who, appealing to the spirit of Vatican II, will sort of take lines from the Second Vatican Council out of their proper context in order to push for more heterodox theologies that I don't think the Second Vatican Council was calling for at all. And so because you have sort of all of these rival groups that are fighting and arguing over the meaning and impact and legacy of Vatican II, it prompted me to do a lot of research into the Second Vatican Council, reading the documents, as well as reading prior councils and prior encyclicals from previous popes and popes that came after in how to best read the council and how to interpret its documents. So as I make this series of videos talking about the Second Vatican Council, I hope that it will help sort of bring some clarity to anyone who is confused about what the Second Vatican Council did or what it means, as well as hopefully calm the waters a little bit and ease away from the discord and acrimony that has characterized the fight over Vatican II. And so as I embark on this series talking about the Second Vatican Council, I would just ask that anybody who has any questions about the Second Vatican Council, any points of controversy, or even any points of disagreement with anything that I might say, please leave them in the comments so that I can look into them and hopefully answer any questions or even correct any errors or mistakes that I might make in my videos. But with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here. I realize that this is a little bit of a shorter episode than what I normally do, but I just wanted to sort of introduce this coming series, give a little bit of background information about the Second Vatican Council, as well as ask you all for any points that you want me to look into or go over. Again, just please leave those in the comments. But I hope this video was still spiritually fruitful for you. If it was, be sure to like, comment, do whatever it is that people of the internet do, and I will see you all next week with my first episode talking about the Second Vatican Council. God bless you.